Thanks for tuning in to Tuskegee Renaissance.
Open your mind.
This is where history speaks, wisdom guides, and progress flourishes. From the legacies that built this town to the innovations shaping its future, we honor the past while advancing full speed ahead.
We should live our dreams.
Let's dive into the stories,
I say everybody.
the vision, and the brilliance of Tuskegee then and now.
Do not what you want to
Purpose driven prosperity. Curious about what that means? Stick around for this episode of the Tuskegee Renaissance podcast featuring Brenda Stroud. Back in 2023, while I was working with the Tuskegee Area Chamber of Commerce,
do. If we want to shine.
we assembled a dynamic circle, people who had already planted deep roots in Tuskegee, and others who saw the untapped promise of what this town could be. Among those heavy hitters, Brenda Stroud's story hit different. With a real estate portfolio that included 22 properties, Brenda's footprint is more than sizable. It's transformative.
Shine, my people, shine this time into the sky if you want to shine. Oh.
Born into a family with limited means, if it was not essential, Brenda had to work for it. And she did it at one point while navigating the challenges of being a teenage mother. Life hit her with some hard knocks: divorce, bankruptcy, setbacks that would have broken many, but not Brenda. She kept getting back up. And today she's in a good space, thriving, building, and helping to shape a new era of legacy and prosperity in Tuskegee. Brenda Stroud, real estate investor, resilient woman, and our guest on Tuskegee Renaissance.
Well, first, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. It is an honor to be here with you. I want to go back to one of the things you said earlier, which was being a teenage mother. I did graduate high school and I was pregnant with my son, my only child, who is about to turn 40, and he is also my business partner. So when back in 2020, when I decided to get into real estate investing full time, it was a natural step to invite my son to join me in that process. So my niece, who was a student or had recently gotten accepted to Tuskegee University in the veterinarian program, is the reason why we ended up in Tuskegee. I grew up hearing about Tuskegee and was familiar with the historical and cultural value that Tuskegee added, and I was excited to join her on her in her orientation to the university. So when I came with her on the orientation, which was my first time coming to Tuskegee, I was shocked at the condition of the town itself. I didn't expect to see, boarded up buildings or, a reduced number of actual businesses in the square and all the things that kind of caught me off guard. But as a result of that, my son and I decided to plant our investment flag in Tuskegee because that's right around the time I decided to become a full-time real estate investor. We live on the outskirts of Atlanta, so we could have easily invested in Atlanta, but Atlanta has enough investors. Tuskegee did not. So we felt like the most logical step for us to take is to invest our investment dollars in Tuskegee and be a part of the revitalization. So I do know that Tuskegee at one point in time was a thriving middle to upper class community. And excuse me, and I would love to see, it return to, to that, that the value be brought back into the community because what I learned when I started looking at the real estate, so they have a lot of air properties, a lot of abandoned properties. That of course affects the tax base, and which affects the infrastructure and all the things that's connected to what would be funded if those houses were actually occupied. So it just made sense to decide to be a part of that revitalization, to be a part of bringing value back to the properties that we invested in Tuskegee. We also found out once we got there that there was a housing shortage for the university. So one of the first things that we started to do with the properties that we bought was to establish student housing so that we can kind of help to provide quality housing for students who decided or decided to live off campus. So that's kind of where we started with our investing when we bought our first property in June of 2020. And then it just kind of grew from there. After we bought our first property is when I joined an all-female real estate investment group. Once I joined that group, it solved one of the problems I've always had in reference to real estate investing, which was how to fund my projects. I've been involved in real estate probably all of my adult life. I bought my first property. I was 21, 22. I encouraged my son to buy his first property. He was 19. So we were familiar with the value of owning real estate, but we just could not connect how we could effectively do that and afford to do it and grow from there. Well, being a part of that real estate investment group, I had access to passive investors, which is people who had private money to lend. They either use their 401ks or their personal funds, and I was considered an active investor. So the passive investor loaned their monies to the active investor, which happened to be I happened to be one of them, and that's what helped me to start growing my portfolio in Tuskegee. Um,
So, so kind of dial that back a minute.
sure.
You weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, and you weren't born into a family that had just surplus money sitting around, were you?
No, not at all. Actually, my parents are from Raleigh, North Carolina. They were part of the Great Northern Migration in the late 60s, which we moved our family north to the Washington, D.C. area. I learned later in life that the reasons why my parents, I think, chose Arlington County, excuse me, Arlington County, which is where we grew up. At that time, they had one of the best school systems. So my parents who did not get to go to my mother graduated high school but did not get to go to college. She had planned to go to college, but she did not go to college because she was needed to stay home to take care of her grandparents at the time, her grandmother and so on. And then my father, who had to leave school in the third grade, he was the oldest, to go to work on a farm to help provide for the family. So for various different reasons, they didn't get a chance to fulfill their educational dreams, and they wanted that for us.
Mhm.
So by migrating north, putting us into Arlington County, which was an amazing experience, they were able to change our destiny just by making that decision. And it was tight. Financially, it was tight for us. We didn't feel it at the time because we were a tight-knit family. We did everything together as a family. But at the time we when we moved north, my father was a mechanic, self-taught mechanic. My mother would do odd jobs, but was about to take a job with the United States Post Office, which would have definitely changed our financial footprint. But when she went to the physical to have her physical to proceed to take the job as a letter carrier, that's when they found that she had breast cancer.
Oh, goodness.
Yes. So that of course, she never became a letter carrier. That began her battle with breast cancer, which she fought for like 13 years until she passed away in the early 90s at the age of 49. So because of that diagnosis and that, of course, she couldn't work because she was fighting for her life and caring for four children. It was
Mm.
me, my two sisters, and my brother. I'm next to the oldest. And then my father, who's at that point the only one that was really working. So for us as their children, we end up now I feel like we were entrepreneurs at such a young age. We anything that we wanted, we had to earn and pay for. And they took care, of course, the roof over our head, the food, and all those kind of things. But if I wanted a yearbook, I had to go to work. I had to go work for it. So we were doing everything from cutting grass, shoveling snow. We all had paper routes. I mean, it was always, we were always doing something to contribute financially to the house and to try and reduce the burden on our parents as we got older. We were all stair steps, so we were 1 year apart, except for my youngest brother and sister who were 11 months apart. So we were a close knit family.
But that experience sounds like it just instilled this incredible work ethic in
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely believe that that's where it stemmed from. It's how our parents taught us you work for what you want, what yes, what you want is compared to what you need. The importance of being active in the community. Of course, we always went to church, and even as a letter carrier, I mean, not a letter carrier, even as a newspaper, we delivered the Washington Star newspaper from way back in the day. We were providing a service to the community by getting the news out to them and all the things. So we were actively involved in the community. I was a Girl Scout. I sold the most cookies in Arlington County. Ooh, child. you know, all the things. They still had us involved in all the things, whether it was sports or, they had four children. So they went four different directions and they were always present at anything that we participated in. They were always present. So they definitely encouraged us and guided us to be healthy, productive citizens in whatever environment we lived in. So I'm always thinking about others, even though I didn't think of us as they describe poor, but we money wasn't overflowing because we did so much together. But a lot of the things they did with us was free, but it was fun. We would go to the local. We went to every park in Arlington County on the weekends. They would pack a picnic. We would go to the park and play, or monuments or whatever. But it created a very rich and healthy childhood for us, where it wasn't really about the money. It was more about the experience.
That's a
Yeah,
beautiful story.
yeah.
Well, kind of fast forward, and
Hmm.
you mentioned your son a moment ago.
Yeah.
Tell me about Brandon.
Oh my goodness. Brandon is the light of my life. Like I said, I graduated high school at 17. I was pregnant. I was 5 months pregnant with Brandon when I graduated. So right after I turned 18, he was born. And I mean, it was him and I against the world, basically. You know, everything from that point forward, it was about what's the best decision to make for Brandon. What's the best area to live in that would provide him a good home experience, a good school system, all of those things. I became a when I graduated from high school, I worked for the Department of Defense. In the DC area, most people work for the government. So I worked my last year of high school as a senior, and then I went into a full-time job with the Department of Defense, and I worked with them for several years. Then I went to work for the post office as a letter carrier, and then eventually I became a law enforcement, a police officer in Prince George's County. All of those decisions were made because they offered something that can improve my life of my son. I left the Department of Defense for a job with the post office because they had better benefits and provided a little bit more, a better pay. I left the job with the post office for the job with the police department because they had even better benefits, and I could retire at 20 years as compared to working for the government. I was so young, I would have had to probably carry mail for almost 40 years before I could retire. So I decided to go with the police department, which of course opened more doors for me. And I ended up retiring from the police department 2 years early because of a diagnosis of scleroderma. I needed a warmer climate to live in. So that's when I migrated south to Georgia.
So you talked about Brandon and you guys journeyed together, mother and child, but today you
Yes.
and Brandon have redefined your relationship. And
Yeah.
as I understand it, Brandon works in a non-traditional industry, certainly for Black people.
Yes, he does. He does. I'm so proud of him because he was able to identify his passion at a very young age, which was racing. His father was, involved in racing as an amateur. He would always take Brandon to the track on the weekends and to races and things of that nature. My father was a mechanic as well, so you can kind of say that whole car connection. He had just had it all the way around. But once he actually went to the track and started. And became involved with his father in racing, he got the bug. So I think he was probably about when he started seriously considering racing, or at least the industry, he probably was about 13, 14 years old. So then when he graduated from high school, he wanted to go to a high performance mechanics school. I wanted him to go to college in engineering. We went back and forth, and eventually I realized it was his life, and I supported him going to this high performance mechanics school. Well, after that, he actually got a job in the industry, National Hot Rod Association. He got a job as a mechanic and as a crew member, and that's kind of where it all began for him. He came to Georgia. The team that he got selected to work for was actually right around the corner from where I lived in Georgia. So I was able to support him in that transition. And it got to he did so well in this particular industry that now the team that he works for, he runs all the teams. He's like a crew chief over multiple different cars. He's also a tuner. And then he also found himself in a position where he could hire his father, that he now also works in the industry as a professional, and they are on the same team. And it's not, that's not something that's very common in that industry, as you mentioned before, that you have a father and son that's in an industry that doesn't have a whole lot of people that looks like us, that's involved in. And it's the numbers are growing, which is fantastic, but it's still not a lot of people that looks like us. So even their story is book worthy, I would think. But I am so proud of him. He's married. He married his high school sweetheart. They have two children. He's just doing an amazing job. I could not have a better son, and I'm learning from him. He was fortunate enough to identify his passions at a young age and actually pursue them and make it a part of his everyday life. A lot of us go through life not even knowing what our passion is, just kind of falling into jobs or falling into activities. And then later in life, you kind of try and tap into your passions just a little bit. I was able to witness him explore his passions from a very young age and then pursue it. And that's what I realized when it came time to make a decision about his future. It's his life.
Wow,
Yeah.
wisdom. Wisdom we learn from our children very often. Well, today you and Brandon are partners in a real estate venture, making a huge dent in Tuskegee. But for people who don't know the name Brenda Stroud and don't attach that name to real, real estate development, tell me about your presence here in Tuskegee in the real estate market.
Tuskegee to me, is an amazing area, a unique opportunity for us to be a part of or add to the historical value of being actually present in Tuskegee and adding value and creating homes that hopefully people can come back to. We've been investing in Tuskegee now almost 5 years. Since coming to Tuskegee in 2020, we've done about 32 transactions, and those transactions consist of short-term rentals. We've done some wholesaling transactions. We've flipped, renovated, and sold homes, which is also referred to as flip homes. I've done some owner financing. We've done a little bit of everything in Tuskegee. We're currently holding about 22 rental properties in Tuskegee. I've also invited other investors to come to Tuskegee and also add value, do something similar to what we're doing. But we have, by the time I would say by the time the mayor and then became aware that we were there, we already owned 10 properties. I agree that I kind of quietly came in and started doing my thing. I didn't see the importance of making a whole lot of noise. I felt it was more important to start adding value and to start creating quality housing for, at this point, for more than just college students. I also rent to faculty members at the university. We also rent to Section 8 and traditional rentals. So we kind of service a little bit of quite a few different, entities that are in need of quality housing. Um, but I love what I do in Tuskegee. I invite other investors to come to Tuskegee to invest. Is there is enough to go around. I am definitely not one that wants to kind of keep it close and not, encourage other people to come and see what I see in Tuskegee, which is a great community that just needs those investment dollars. Tuskegee is I sometimes describe it as an underserved community, but it's not because of the people. It's because of the lack of funding that comes towards Tuskegee, whether it's on the federal level, on the state level, or whatever the case may be. It appears to me that it's connected to the lack of funding that are going to communities that look like Tuskegee. And if we're going to make sure that these communities survive, those of us who are part of the community got to have to invest in the community in order for us to continue to thrive.
So you put, as I said a moment ago, beautiful finishes in your homes. Describe a couple of your properties and what's your philosophy about home ownership from a real estate investor perspective?
We have Homes that are as small as 700 square feet, which I ended up paying $10 for that property, and we added value to it. That by the time we were done with it, it was worth about 110, $120,000, which is a big deal. For us. Two, we have a mansion on Main Street. Beautiful, beautiful property on Main Street that we renovated, and we try to keep as much of the original characters of the older homes that we purchased. We have at least three homes that was built in 1900. So that particular property on Main Street right now, we're renting to faculty members, but we hope to eventually turn it into a small event type of rental venue where you can have weddings and family gatherings and things of that nature. Because Tuskegee really doesn't have anything that does that, that's available for rental on that level. We also have a farm that's just under 24 acres. That house was also built in 1900. We just finished renovating that property, and we'll get it occupied. We converted it to a 7 bedroom, 4 bath property that's just probably about 3 miles from the 3 or 4 miles from the university. So we have various different sizes and styles of homes that we've purchased. Sometimes people will bring them to me. They hear what we're doing in the community, and they'll bring their properties to me to see if I'm interested in buying them. And for the most part, we typically do if we can come to an agreeable amount. So we kind of get our properties from a lot of different places. But our goal is to add value, is to create quality housing. We don't want to put lipstick on a pig. I don't think that's good for the community, nor is it good for the people that may be living in those properties. So that is our goal, is to be a part of the revitalization of Tuskegee. Now, right now we're in the residential side. Eventually, we like to go over to the commercial side as well as do some development down the road. Hopefully, the 22 acres, we'd love we're looking into developing a fourplex style of community back there that would be for students as well as for locals. We want to make Tuskegee a destination. And I know many years ago it was definitely a destination for families to come on the weekends or whatever. I just think that as a result of some of the things that have happened in the past, it's not as much of a destination as it used to be. There's a beautiful lake in Tuskegee that I feel like it's not being used to its fullest potential to encourage people to come and spend the evening there or the weekend. So there are a lot of areas that hopefully, excuse me, we can be a part of excuse me, that we can be a part of improving its the quality of it, and to put it back into circulation in the community like the lake. Um, and we want other people to join us in that, because there are people in Tuskegee that love Tuskegee and don't ever want to leave. And we want to make sure they have everything they need if Tuskegee is where they want to be. So we want to do what we can to make that happen.
Well, I certainly, as a resident of Tuskegee, appreciate your attitude and respect for this town. But there's always two sides to a story.
Yes.
So, what are some of the challenges of being a real estate investor in Tuskegee?
Mhm. Well, one of the challenges I know I'd share with you early on was the appraisal process. You have appraisers that are biased in reference to their views of Tuskegee. They either don't see the value in it, or they continue to see it, in a negative light. So when we go and we renovate our properties and we then try to turn around and get it appraised and things of that nature, I run into challenges with the quality of the appraisers that are in that area. And the fact that they're comparing a property that we just renovated and put over $100,000 into it, and they're using as a comparable a property that no one has touched for generations. So that's not a comparable. You know what I mean? So we've tried to tackle that. But first of all, by understanding who are the appraisers that truly know how to, establish the values of the properties that we renovate, or that's not coming to the table with preconceived notions about the values in Tuskegee. So that's one of the biggest hurdles we've had to kind of overcome, as well as finding funding. There are some loans out there called DSCR loans that fund investors' properties like what we're doing, buying it as an investor. And I couldn't really, when I wanted to go to a local credit union to get some funding, they really didn't offer anything that I could have used to try and finance some of my projects in Tuskegee. I hope that that changes down the road. But right now, it was getting the funding in place kind of was a little bit difficult to actually do in Tuskegee. So I had to bring my funding with me from outside of Tuskegee. But is that possible? Yes, it is possible. What I've learned in talking to people is that there aren't a lot of people that understand how you can do what we're doing in Tuskegee. They don't they're either not aware of DSCR loans, which are debt loans that are based on the value of the asset. It's not based on your debt to income ratio, which is a traditional loan typically is. Or they're not exactly sure how to pull together maybe the scope of work or some of the things that you need to look for that will help to organize your project so you can be successful. Now, don't get me wrong, we've had some bumps in the road along the way. We've lost some money along the way. We've used contractors that didn't do a great job and had to bring in another contractor to clean it up. That's just part of the business. But also the other thing is one of the things I just brought up: contractors. Trying to identify good contractors. Initially, I started with trying to use people within the community because I want to try and keep as many of the dollars in the community as possible. But we've also had to kind of expand out and get contractors from Montgomery and other surrounding areas. And in some cases, I brought them with me from the Atlanta area. So you just have to be aware of what you're dealing with so that you can find a solution. You have different tiers that you can kind of use, for, of course, first initially you start locally and then kind of fan out from there. But ultimately, I want to be able to accomplish my goal, which is to create quality housing. So those are some of the things that I've noticed about Tuskegee, as well as their permitting process is 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 interesting. I've kind of figured it out now, but it's not the same as it is in when you go into a larger, towns or cities or whatever the case may be. But you do need to take the time to understand what's required in Tuskegee and meet them there to fulfill those requirements.
Well, you have dropped some wisdom on us today on this podcast, and unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. We would love to have you back, though, to delve deeper into this subject and to also just have other people to learn
Yeah.
some lessons from you because you dropped some pearls here today. So, um, yeah, you'll be hearing from us again. But
I'd love
until
to come
then,
back.
I just want to thank you for really enriching all of us, all of the listeners of Tuskegee Renaissance, and I think your episode's going to draw a lot of attention. So, thank
Oh,
you, Brenda Stroud.
well, thank you. I appreciate you for doing this. I think this is amazing. It's important that people see Tuskegee the way that we see it, which is a valuable asset to our culture and to our community, and we need to make sure it survives.
That is a wonderful note for us to end on. Have a great day.
You too.
Remember, together we shine.